afternoon. My name is Simon Rawson. I'm the Principal Consultant Information Management at Powermark Solutions. Good day to you, whether it's morning, afternoon or evening, depending on where in the world you are. Today I'm going to be talking about the art of information architecture in Microsoft 365. Too many organisations jump straight into Teams and Microsoft 365 without really considering how they want the technology to transform their processes and that they'll use the platform for the foreseeable future. Most, alas, are headed for information sprawl. This session will cover information process vision setting, getting senior management buy-in, information lifecycle, search and continuous improvement, and what you need in the information architecture to support it. Although this session focuses on high-level information models and concepts, I'll demonstrate how the concepts can be put into practice and the implications for compliance, security, search, and why it's an important component for the later introduction of AI and Cortex knowledge management if you're going down that path. I'm not going to read through the list of bullet points on my slides. The bullet points are for you to read and for your later consumption. Attendees dialing into this session will have the presentation deck available. Included in the deck are extensive sets of notes. Feel free to ask questions in the chat window. Although the session is recorded, I'm responding to questions in real time. I'll leave my contact details and am happy to help after the Collab 365 Global Conference concludes. All too often, Microsoft 365 projects fail to deliver the business value they could and end up instead with uncontrolled sprawl. It's never too late to retrofit an information architecture into Microsoft 365. However, the longer you go without it, the more difficult it becomes. The main purpose of the presentation is to give you tools for information strategy planning and engagement with executive management, show why Microsoft 365 is strategically important from an information management perspective, and give you models for business information governance and support, as opposed to technical solution governance, which is well covered by other speakers during this conference. Don't you hate those presentations which are full of wonderful high-fidelity images which don't give you anything to take away and use? Okay, there is a purpose to this image. It's a working bulldozer. It's scarred with signs of use. All the content in these notes and presentation has been put into practice in one project or another over more than 10 years. Feel free to use any of the material. Just remember to attribute it to Powermark Solutions. Any material I've borrowed from elsewhere is credited. This image, by the way, is not a real bulldozer. It's an image from Grand Theft Auto and is no doubt copyright. Not that there was a copyright notice on the Wikia site that I found it. And that's an issue about information and knowledge management. The context of information you find is sometimes more important than the information itself. More to come on that topic in a couple of slides. If I do borrow information from elsewhere, I'll attribute it so you'll be able to follow it up. Traditional definitions of information governance focus on risk and compliance. This misses the opportunity side of the coin, which is the better use of information and solutions, such as Office 365, to improve business process effectiveness. The biggest roadblocks preventing maximally effective deployment of Microsoft 365 is lack of executive management support, leading to insufficient budget and staffing to be able to do it right. It's harder than you think. You won't get that support talking about risk and compliance. You've got a far better chance of getting that support by talking about how Microsoft 365 underpins organisational strategy and contributes to innovation and ongoing improvement of your processes, services and products. I compare the complexity and cost of introducing new information management systems to the complexity of introducing a new ERP. The two main differences are that IM solutions typically get a tenth or less of the budget. and not everyone in an organisation is impacted by the introduction of a new ERP. So the session outcomes I'm going to aim at here. I'm not going to read through this list of bullet points, but at the end of the day you'll be able to argue why investment in information architecture is critically important and ways that you can engage and obtain senior management sponsorship. I'm also going to demonstrate a number of these precepts in operation. The first thing is to consider, what are you calling this project? Is it a collaboration project? Is it the implementation of Office 365 for remote working? Is it part of a broader digital transformation project? You need to define what it means for you and your key processes, and you need to find examples of key processes where it can make a difference that will make people sit up and take notice. The foundational elements of information management, and by information management I mean document management, records management and collaboration, file management if you like. So we need a strategy. Number one, we need to know what the processes we want people to move towards will be and how that supports the organisation. The foundational capabilities are around documents, images and audio-visual content, rich content if you like. It involves development of taxonomies and classification models. If we're talking information and records management speak, that's business classification schemes or BCS, and retention disposal authorities, RDA. That's reflected in Microsoft 365 in retention labels or other mechanisms if you're using add-in technologies for records management. So it's around document type and document type processes, whether it be approvals, whether it be reviews of policies and things along those lines. The records management needs to be seamless and built in behind the scenes so that users don't need to know how to do it. Extending the capability, once you've got the foundations in place, you can move to things like forms and business process workflows and everything else that's done superbly well within the Microsoft 365 platform. Process automation and business intelligence / reporting builds a robust capability. But of course, it's important that we have the right skills to be able to do it. That's people skills, that's process skills, process re-engineering skills, change management and training. We need to be very, very cognizant of information and knowledge curation processes. It needs to be managed for the long term. And of course we need the technology skills to underpin it as well. So if we think about the success factors of any information management project, we need executive sponsorship and the right budget and resources to make it happen. Importantly though, we won't get executive sponsorship unless we can present a vision for information management that excites senior management. A factor for success is also that we put common processes around documents and other content. Consistent processes apply across the organisation so that you don't have different teams or different business units using different processes for classification or different processes for seeking approvals on content. If you have that, it means that it's difficult to support it because you won't understand what the organisation is doing, and people won't easily be able to move between business units and understand how that business unit, that new business unit, is working. So we need a common information architecture, and it needs to be supported by really, really effective training and support. We also need to consider what motivates people. If you're talking senior management, and this is addressed by the infographic that we see here, they're going to be turned on by organisational or strategic measures. How can the organisation become more effective? How can it operate better? Whereas at the other end of the spectrum with users, what's in it for me? How can their job be made easier? So for instance, notifications on due dates for things like reports or presentations, and things along those lines. Automate those notifications and allow people to find the information, the work in progress, and they will buy into it quite well. Time is required to do this because you can't build Rome in a night. So if we think about the way we organise information and the overarching information architecture, there are a number of key things. I argue that processes are the single most important thing and lie at the heart of what we do. And the reason for that, if you think about business content, whether it's intranet content, whether it's a document or whatever, all information in your business is produced by processes designed for the support or ingestion by other processes. Think about this as we go through the presentation, and if you can find one example that doesn't apply, then send me an email with it and I'll send you $100. I don't believe I'll get any challenges to this. All information is produced and consumed by processes, so therefore processes ought to be at the heart of your information architecture. All your organisation's services and products are developed and delivered by people according to your business processes. So services and products are an outcome of your processes and are delivered by your processes, and are typically the things that you will deliver both through your electronic and online channels as well as your real world channels as well, what used to be called clicks and bricks. So knowledge, people and organisation is an important underpinning aspect of delivery of your products and services. People work with processes. If you're delivering a service, if someone internally is reading a procedure or a work instruction and they find that it doesn't work for them or they have a question, you need to be able to provide feedback mechanisms. You need to be able to ask questions when they're necessary, to provide suggestions for improvement if something's not working well or is unclear, or to provide other requests. I collectively call that feedback, but feedback covers a number of things: suggestions for improvement, requests for further information or clarification, notification about errors, and of course collaboration and conversations is extremely important because all of the processes require non-explicit information, tacit knowledge, conversations and collaboration. If we talk about information management processes, and I'm talking document-centric processes here, then these are the types of things that we commonly see from organisation to organisation. People want a consistent way of applying version control. They want to know about the information life cycle. They want to be able to get at their drafts very quickly because a person's drafts are effectively their work in progress. And conversely, that helps with search down the track. If you're doing search across your enterprise for a piece of information, do you want drafts coming up or do you want final versions coming up? There tend to be a lot of drafts and a lot of redundant, outdated or trivial associated content. That's ROT or rot. And you want to be able to winnow out the gems as opposed to the rubbish. These are processes which I find very common across organisations and which form the heart of your information architecture. And I'll show you how metadata and content types and search relate to this in a few moments. It gets more sophisticated. The highest value content in an organisation tends to be its policies, its procedures, its work instructions and guidance. This is the how we work type model of content. The model that I'm presenting here is based on the ISO 9000 quality content hierarchy, which have policies at the top. Every policy must have one or more procedures, and conversely, a procedure supports one or more policies. But then you have a larger number of supporting artifacts like work instructions, quick reference guides, training content, and then you have things like training and attendance forms and checklists and things along those lines, which form records of how we are working in an organisation. So the single most valuable thing that you can do is provide a great experience for searching policies and procedures and associated content, and ensuring that it's not duplicated, that your intranet, which is likely to be built in SharePoint, is built on the same information that's managed as documents. The moment a new procedure is given approval and signed off, it should then be available wherever that's found. I've got references here for the ISO 9000 quality document hierarchy, but also to a concept, not a system or a solution, called integrated management systems. Integrated management systems are well entrenched in high-risk organisations such as mining or energy or utilities. They tend to be a framework for the organisation's compliance and operations. Any process in the organisation should fit inside the integrated management system. The best known in the world is British Petroleum's Operations Management System, which has 2 tiers and a total of only 42 elements. That means that's a great navigation structure which covers any information in the entirety globally of BP. I know about it because I had the good fortune to work on their global project a number of years ago, unfortunately in the aftermath of the Deepwater Horizon disaster. Now we're going to move to a demonstration, and I'm going to show you how a number of these things apply in practice. I've moved into Teams, and I'm showing the Monday tennis team. In here, there's no metadata, there's no information architecture. What I'm showing is a number of channels used to manage the processes associated with tennis, and in here I have a committee channel, and inside it an August 2020 folder which is used for managing committee meeting information. There's no metadata here, no way of telling whether these documents are finished or in draft other than by adopting file naming conventions, which is a very, very bad practice. This is great for people who are infrequent and unsophisticated users of Teams and SharePoint, but it doesn't suit most business processes, and I can't apply retention to this particularly easily when I need to, other than by applying rules associated at the folder level. It's very coarse-grained. So let's go and have a look at another instance down in the PowerMark demo team, and I'll go into the Files menu, and the first thing we note is now we've got metadata. We've got the out-of-the-box title column. We've got additional metadata or columns, including a notes column, which I find one of the most singly useful pieces of metadata to add. A document life cycle column here, doc status, where we can tell the difference between a final working document, a draft, or a review draft. So we can use this to help manage our automated processes for retention and disposal and filtering out of junk. We've got a document type column, which is essentially a classification column which our retention labels are keyed to. And then we've got other metadata as well. We'll have a look at the other metadata in a moment. The next thing I'd like to point out here is the new menu, which I've edited to include standard generic folders and document types, but we've also got some specific templates too: a plan, briefing notes, presentation, report. And the reason for attaching these templates is that we can give people very easily the templates they need to use, instead of for them having to hunt them up in a corporate template library. The other most important significant bit is that we can attach default metadata to each of these templates, and therefore hide the business, the process, or the necessity for users to keep them up to date. So let's create a new plan, and I'm going to say test collab 365 plan, being very inventive there. It'll take that plan, it'll apply the template that's associated with that plan, and it will give us that template document. I'm not a great fan for editing purposes of the word browser version. We can see here that we've got metadata that's embedded within the document, but we can't edit that. So I'm going to open Word itself. Having opened Word, we can do things like edit metadata in situ within the document. Now, that's somewhat useful, but I don't regard it as great because there are inconsistencies in the way you do it. So, for instance, in this classification column here, doc type, I can't actually edit that in situ. So there are different rules for different types of metadata. Dates, fine. Things like people and group information, again, I can't edit it. So I don't try and have people update these things within the document. Luckily, Microsoft makes available a view, a SharePoint properties view, which gives us access to all the metadata in the appropriate order that we specify in SharePoint. So here we can see that we've got a default title. And if I change that, we can see that it immediately changes within the document. And I can see the defaults that are associated with this particular template. Now, sometimes the templates that you provide, there may be nothing distinguishing the document content itself. It may just be the metadata. So I could, for instance, have had a corporate plan or a team plan. Same template, different metadata. And what I'm doing therefore is hiding the necessity for users to apply that. This is very important and a substantial change in the way we work at the moment. Let's work through the other metadata here. Document version is just free text. And I find that's basically all that people use in general, or all they need. I never bother putting the SharePoint version number in because with collaborative editing, SharePoint increments the version number with every change that you make and it becomes useless as a reference point. I've got metadata indicating business value here. In this particular case, a plan is always important, so it's classified or flagged as a key document. Business value is important for retention rules. And if I'm creating a new document that I think could be the basis of other documents in future as an exemplar, I can also flag it as a template. Or if I'm working on a project, I can flag it as a milestone or deliverable document, each of which is useful to be able to do. I've got some metadata associated with dates. So let's say I want to, for instance, complete this on the 30th of August, which is obviously prior to the date on which this presentation is being delivered. But considering that I am doing this on the 28th, this could be quite relevant. And I can put other metadata in place as well. Okay, that's good, that's wonderful. So let's go back. So we've demonstrated how we can associate default metadata and hide the necessity for users to update metadata associated with templates. Template management is not nearly promoted as one of the key things you need to manage. The other thing we can do, though, with respect to document lifecycle and types is that we can look at information and filter it based on this lifecycle, because what we really want to do is look at work in progress. So what I'm going to do is go up here to the views, and I'm going to select the drafts view. And what this will do is winnow out all the documents that are in draft status. So this helps us focus on work in progress, and it also helps us manage legacy or redundant information as well. If we've got a draft document, for instance, with an outdated target date, and if we look at the conventional SharePoint metadata about modified, last modified, If it's been modified more than a year ago, then, well, I'd say it's a particular candidate for deletion. So it helps us manage outdated information as well as current information. So this is work in progress, it's drafts, it's stuff we have to work and focus on. And here is where some of this additional metadata starts playing a good role. We can put things in this metadata about target date, approved date and closed date, which are generically useful, and it wouldn't matter which business unit you're working in. So the other thing that I can do to focus on work in progress is that I can trigger a flow and ask users to enter tasks against documents. And as an example, if I look at the actions or tasks that are open for this document, in metadata as opposed to in planar or separate tasks, I've got actions associated with this document, due dates that are associated with this library and documents. Myself as the action owner is the basis on which all of these things are filtered out, and I've got status on the actions as well. So again, this is pretty generic action management, but the focus is always on work in progress. Microsoft 365 does a pretty good job of helping us with current documents and documents that our teams have been working on. But it doesn't tell the full story. So let's go and have a look at the projects library. Here we see a different view, and it's oriented around project management. We have a number of projects which are represented as either document sets or folders, and we've got custom metadata that's associated with project management. We have managed metadata for the type of project. We've got tracking metadata. Here, this formatting that we see here is actually out of the box, and if we want to edit that, we can either do that in the view settings, or we can go down through the formatting option within the view, and here we can see that we've got choice pills which associate colours with options. So that's out of the box and pretty easy to then start applying formatting associated with status. Here we've got a progress bar, and this is not out of the box. This has a snippet of JavaScript or JSON code associated with the column based on the value. This is where you'd need to get your technical staff in IT to help you out. They ought to have the skills to be able to do this pretty simply and quickly, and if not, there's a lot of sample code there out on the internet. So we're talking about process management here, and at the same time we're also talking about the ability to help manage your processes in an automated fashion. So we've got status, we've got date tracking here, always very, very useful, and we can create views which allow us to roll up and summarize some of this information. So here's a view which groups projects by their status, which allows us then to open up and winnow in on, for instance, our on-track projects. So we can see things like the total value of these small projects and the number of projects, etc. This is not attempting to be an all-singing, all-dancing project management solution. What I'm trying to do here is show you how you can construct views and metadata to support common business processes. Who's responsible for doing this? Your information management team need to learn these skills: how to approach processes, how to design metadata and views and the other out-of-the-box things to better support business unit processes. But business units themselves need to be able to do this for themselves. Now, I am not saying for one moment it should be open slather, but each business unit needs to have somebody responsible for support and administration that can provide guidance to people who have the skills perhaps to do this for themselves, or at least ask or seek out opportunities to be able to configure these sorts of things. So that's an example of projects and project tracking. Let's have a look at another example of these sorts of case management instances. So let's move into the audits library. In this particular case, the demo example is around audits that are conducted on a regular basis. So again, we can see tailoring of the new menu with content that's relevant to the processes. And we can create either an audit document or we can create an audit document set. Document sets are kind of like folders on steroids in SharePoint. Let's put some sample information in, and I can put notes. I notice again we've got defaults. This is all automatically defaulted to an audit type, and the status is open. Again, status open, closed helps us track work in progress and current information, and that's a heck of an overlay, more than you get in your file shares. And we've got things like target dates again, start dates and close dates, very useful generic dates right across your organisation. In this particular case, we've got process-specific metadata such as audit outcome, whether it's passed, failed or whatever. So let's create that. Having created this document set, Teams and SharePoint then opens that new one we've created, and we can see one of the distinguishing factors which make document sets so useful. We have a number of template documents which have automatically been provisioned. We've got a notice of a forthcoming audit, and again, if we look at the document there, bearing in mind this is test or dummy data rather than production data, and we've got embedded metadata again, yada yada yada. So very useful, and there are plenty of examples of this case management type process that apply right across organisations. So that may be things like a request, it may be a complaint that's lodged, it may be an insurance claim. All of these processes are characterised by processes that are pretty common, pretty standard, and documents that are created or consumed as a consequence. I'm going to hold at this particular point and move on to show you how this then relates back to search. Search in Office 365 and SharePoint is still to be fully modernised. In SharePoint, if you want to do refinable search, that's drill down search, you need to use the classic experience. A number of partners, on the other hand, provide modern search experience, and I'm going to show you one at the moment. Bear in mind, I'm not trying to push this as a product, and there are a number of alternatives. Here what I'm looking to is a search center, and what I'm going to do is do a search on Cortex. Cortex, of course, is the new knowledge management product from Microsoft. And you notice here that this is configured with the typical things that you'd expect in search, everything, people, this site, etc. But it's also configured by policies and procedures and templates and agreements. Templates are very important, and as you've seen from my past couple of demonstrations, you can flag a template document regardless of whether it's a good example, an exemplar, or a true template. Let's have a look at template search in this particular case. We get a list of search results and the ability to go to advanced search. Now bear in mind that what we're looking at here is all modern and not classic. So here we can drill down by function and we can filter by function, and if we wanted to look and drill down even further we could do so. And as an example here we can drill down even further. So we've got, in this particular instance, and this is keyed to the information architecture, function, business purpose, we have products and services. Remember that products and services are the core reason for your organization. and that we can also drill down on related organisations as well. So by applying these filters, we can winnow down very quickly, in this particular case on templates, but we're also showing how just about any type of information can be drilled down on based on keyword search together with refiners. In this slide, I've summarised some of the things we've covered during the demonstration. Again, I'm not going to read through each of these bullet points. One of the most important things, though, that helps us with the automation and defaulting of metadata is template management. And I can't stress too much how important this is. It will be a new skill for people who are involved in information management, and probably your IT people won't have that much experience as well. The importance of putting defaults into place, and the processes of applying these through SharePoint is fairly obscure. So I would say use workflow, use flow to automate the process. We've seen in the use of metadata associated with folders and document sets how classifications can be applied. So key those automatically. When you update a folder's metadata, institute a flow to automate the update of per location defaults. And in that way, if people drag and drop documents from, say, a file share during migration, they'll inherit those defaults. I haven't talked to date about the use of the content type hub and the relationship of columns, metadata to content types. That can be subject of another session in its own right, and I'm presuming that the audience here who are subscribed to Collab 365 are going to be fairly au fait in any case with the architecture behind the scenes in SharePoint. Importantly, keep it consistent and simple. Ensure that you've got common content types, common metadata and common processes right across every team site and Teams instance. Ensure that you've got consistency, because that will simplify the support that you have to provide and ensure that people in the organisation can support themselves, that peers between business units can support each other. Think about when you're provisioning or configuring metadata to support business processes, what metrics are going to be reported on and what metadata can be used to support those. Reporting is not something that you would necessarily put into the first iteration of your implementation, but it's certainly something that will invariably become a common requirement from management. Next up, I'm going to circle back into some other concepts for stakeholder management, for reporting, for getting management support. If you think about the stakeholders who are involved in Office 365 or information management in general, what I've tried to do on this slide is note those who will be typically involved. These are not necessarily groups that are in every organisation, but the function certainly will be. So you've got an information management function which will be responsible for primarily for records and classification. You'll have your IT department who's responsible for infrastructure. You'll have definitely a marketing and comms team who will control your intranet and probably owns the templates. There's a step up that needs to happen between information management, information technology and marketing in order to make that work. You may or may not have a knowledge management unit, and if you do, it may be associated with customer support and may be driven by HR and training. And you may or may not have a process or quality office. Now, I've put in these lighter coloured bubbles around the outside some of the typical things and where they're driven from. This, by the way, is an attempt to distill the situation that occurs from organisation to organisation. You'd need to adapt this picture for your own organisation. There's only one thing I ask you to consider here, and that is, what's missing? And the answer is, it's the business units, because business units are responsible for developing and delivering your products and services. They are the consumers. Everyone else is a supporting agency towards business unit performance. But this is a high-level model because each of these groups, business units, information management, IT, has their own set of responsibilities to do with governance and support. And you need to break this down further to come up with an effective model. This next slide is something I call my oh shit model. When you start breaking down the responsibilities of each of the business units, you can see that it becomes very complicated. Each of these key stakeholders has an important part to play, and responsibilities overlap between business units. Importantly, business units have a critically important part to play. They've got to come to learn how the technology can best be used to support their business processes. I often think that the most important individual in an organisation is a business analyst who is process-centric and who knows how the technology can be deployed to best support business processes and to be able to inculcate that message across the key support stakeholders. Now, to try and simplify this again a little bit, think about responsibilities. Business units are responsible for their content. They own it. The responsibility for infrastructure and systems rests primarily with IT, but they collaborate with typically your information management and process or quality office. The vision and strategy for information management can't come from IT unless information management is a component of IT, but in any case it should be business focused. And all parties have a part to play with respect to change management, training adoption and organisational learning. So consider more broadly, take a step back and think about how well Microsoft 365 or any information management system covers the gamut of information that your organisation produces. Print is something that typically completely escapes Microsoft 365 or any records management solution, and the reason is that typically print productions are produced using InDesign and other Adobe artifacts, and a print PDF can be hundreds of megabytes or even gigabytes in size because of the resolution needed. Transactional documents that may be in your ERP, whether learning management content is in there, whether intranet content is in there, whether internet content is in there. Ideally, you'll have single source management of information, one source that produces a bunch of variants. So this leads to a last couple of slides, a few of my favourite things. So here's an example, and perhaps the screen snapshots don't really illustrate it terribly well. On the top we have a Word document which is a consulting policy, and a tool that I quite like using, Live Publish, is used then to publish this into intranet content, but at the same time it can also be used to publish information out onto an intranet using whatever content management system that you're currently using. So single source, deployed multiple times. We're just about at the end of the presentation. Thank you for sitting through. My contact details are shown on the screen. You can contact me directly via my email address. You can link up with me via LinkedIn, and I'll be available to answer Q&A for the next few minutes. Thank you very much for attending, and look forward to your next session. Thanks.